Hello, boys and girls of Riverbank. Last time we got together, we started Charlotte's Web, and we've since been through 2 chapters. In the first chapter, Wilbur was the runt pig that Fern wanted to raise, and she thought it was an injustice that he wasn't going to be kept alive, so she took care of him. Then her dad in the second chapter said, well, he can't stay at the house, he's costing us too much money. And so now Wilbur has moved to Zuckerman's farm. And today's chapter 3 is called Escape. There's the word right up there, escape. The barn was very large. It was very old. It smelled of hay and it smelled of manure. Manure is poop, by the way. I think I said that last time too. It smelled of the perspirations of tired horses, the wonderful sweet breath of patient cows. It often had a sort of peaceful smell, as though nothing bad could ever happen again in the world. It smelled of grain and of harness dressing, and of axle and grease, and of rubber boots, and of new rope. And whenever a cat was given a fresh fish head to eat in the barn would smell of fish. But mostly it smelled of hay, for there was always hay in the great loft up overhead. And the hay was always being pitched down to the cows and horses and the sheep. The barn was pleasantly warm in the winter when the animals spent most of their time indoors, and it was pleasantly cool in the summer when the big doors stood open wide for the breeze to come through. The barn had stalls on the main floor for the horses, tie-ups on the main floor for the cows, a sheepfold down below for the sheep, and a pig pen down below for Wilbur. And it was full of all sorts of things that you can find in barns. Ladders, grindstones, pitchforks, monkey wrenches, scythes, lawn mowers, snow shovels, axe handles, milk pails, water buckets, empty grain sacks, and rusty rat traps. It was the kind of barn that swallows, which are a kind of bird, like to build their nests in. And it's the kind of barn that children like to play in. And the whole thing was owned by Fern's uncle, Mr. Homer L. Zuckerman. Wilbur's new home was in the lower part of the barn, directly beneath the cows. Mr. Zuckerman knew the manure pile is a good place to keep a young pig. Pigs need warmth, and it was warm and comfortable down there in the barn cellar on the south side. Fern came almost every day to visit him. She found an old milking stool that had been discarded, and she placed the stool in the sheepfold next to Wilbur's pen. There she sat quietly during the long afternoons, thinking and listening and watching Wilbur. The sheep soon got to know her and trust her. So did the geese who lived with the sheep. All the animals trusted her. She was so quiet and friendly. Mr. Zuckerman did not allow her to take Wilbur out, and he did not allow her to get in the pig pen. I wonder why he wouldn't want her to go in the pig pen. Think about that. Here are some pictures. This book is filled with little pictures that are done like sketches. Unlike your story picture books that have bright colored paintings. But he told Fern that she could sit on the stool and watch Wilbur as long as she wanted to. It made her happy just to be near the pig. And it made Wilbur happy, too, to know that she was sitting there right outside his pen. But he never had any fun. No walks, no rides, no swims. One afternoon in June, when Wilbur was almost 2 months old, he wandered out into his small yard outside the barn. Fern had not arrived yet for her usual visit. Wilbur stood in the sun, feeling lonely and bored. There's never anything to do around here, he thought. He walked slowly to his food trough and sniffed it to see if he might have overlooked any of his lunch. He found a small strip of potato skin and he ate it. He kicked his back itch, so he leaned against the fence and rubbed it against the boards. When he was tired of this, he walked indoors, climbed on top of the manure pile, and sat down. He didn't feel like going to sleep. He didn't feel like digging. He was tired of standing still. He was tired of laying down. I'm less than 2 months old and I'm tired of living, he said. And he walked out to the yard again. Well, I'm out here, he said. When I'm out here, he said, there's no place to go but indoors. And there's no place to go but out in the yard when I'm indoors. I read that wrong, but you get the gist. He's bored. He just can't figure out what to do. I bet some of you might feel that way right now. That's where you're wrong, my friend, said a voice. Wilbur looked through the fence and he saw a goose standing there. You don't have to stay in that dirty little yard, said the goose, who walked rather fast. One of the boards is loose. Push on it, push on it, and come on out. What? Wilbur said. Say it slower. At the risk of repeating myself, said the goose, I suggest you come on out. It's wonderful out here. Did you say a board was loose? That I did, said the goose. Wilbur walked to the fence and he saw the goose was right. The one board was loose. He put his head down and he shut his eyes and he pushed. The board gave way. In a minute he had squeezed through the fence and was standing in the long grass outside his yard. The goose chuckled. How does it feel to be free? She asked. I like it, said Wilbur. That is, I guess I like it. Actually, Wilbur felt very weird to be outside his fence, and nothing between him and the big world. Where do you think I better go? Anywhere you like, said the goose. Go down through the orchard, root up the sod. Go down through the garden, dig up the radishes, root up everything, eat grass, look for corn. Look for oats, run all over, skip, dance, and jump and prance. Go down through the orchard and stroll in the woods. The world is a wonderful place when you're young. I can see that, replied Wilbur. He gave a jump in the air and he twirled and ran a few steps, stopped and looked all around, sniffed the smells of the afternoon, and then set off walking down through the orchard. Pausing in the shade of an apple tree, he put his strong snout into the ground and he began pushing and digging and rooting. He felt very happy. He had plowed up quite a piece of ground before anyone noticed him. Mrs. Zuckerman was the first to see him. She saw him from the kitchen window, and she immediately shouted to the man, Homer, she cried, pigs out, Lurvy, pigs out, Homer, Lurvy, the pig's out. He's down there under that apple tree. Now the trouble starts, thought Wilbur. Now I'm going to catch it. The goose heard the racket, and she too started hollering, run, downhill, make for the woods, she shouted to Wilbur. They'll never catch you in the woods. The Cocker Spaniel heard the commotion, and he ran out from the barn to join the chase. Mr. Zuckerman heard, and he came out from the machine shed, where he was mending a tool. Lurvy, the hired man, heard the noise and came up from the asparagus patch where he was pulling weeds. Everybody walked toward Wilbur, and Wilbur did not know what to do. The woods seemed a long way off, and anyway, he'd never been down there in the woods, and he wasn't sure he'd like it. Get around behind him, Lurvy, said Mr. Zuckerman. Drive him toward the barn. Take it easy, don't rush him. I'll go get a bucket of slops. Slops, by the way, is food for pigs. The news of Wilbur's escape spread rapidly among the animals on the place. Whenever any creature broke loose on Zuckerman's farm, the event was of great interest to the others. The goose shouted to the nearest cow that Wilbur was free, and soon all the cows knew. Then one of the cows told one of the sheep, and soon all the sheep knew. The lambs learned it from their mothers, and the horses in their stalls in the barn pricked up their ears when they heard the goose hollering, and soon the horses caught on to what was happening. Wilbur's out, they said. Every animal stirred and lifted its head and became excited to know that one of their friends had gotten free and was no longer penned up or tied fast. Wilbur didn't know what to do or which way to run. It seemed as though everybody was after him. If this is what it's like to be free, he thought, I believe I'd rather be penned up in my own yard. The Cocker Spaniel was sneaking up on him from one side. Lurvy, the hired man, was sneaking up on him from the other side, and Mrs. Zuckerman stood ready to head him off and if he started to the garden. And now Mr. Zuckerman was coming down toward him carrying a pail. This is really awful, thought Wilbur. Why doesn't Fern come? And he began to cry. The goose took command and began giving orders. Don't just stand there, Wilbur. Dodge about, cried the goose. Skip around, run toward me, slip in and out, in and out, and make for the woods, twist and turn. The Cocker Spaniel sprang for Wilbur's hind leg. Wilbur jumped and ran. Lurvy reached out and grabbed him. Mrs. Zuckerman screamed at Lurvy. The goose cheered for Wilbur. Wilbur dodged between Lurvy's legs. Wilbur grabbed the spaniel instead. Wilbur and Lurvy ended up grabbing the spaniel instead. Nicely done, cried the goose. Try it again. Run downhill, suggested the cows. Run toward me, yelled the gander. Gander is a male goose, by the way. Run uphill, cried the sheep. Twist and turn, honked the goose. Jump and dance, said the rooster. And here's the picture of all that mayhem and shenanigans that was going on. Looks like Wilbur was trying to follow the orders, but I think he might get caught. Look out for Lurvy, called the cows. Look out for Zuckerman, yelled the geese. Watch out for the dog, cried the sheep. Listen to me, screamed the goose. Poor Wilbur was dazed and frightened by all of this hullabaloo. He didn't like being the center of all this fuss. He tried to follow the instructions of his friends, but he couldn't run downhill, uphill at the same time, and he couldn't turn and twist when he was jumping and dancing, and he was crying so hard he could barely see anything, and he didn't know what was happening. After all, Wilbur was a very young pig, not more than a baby, really. He wished Fern were there to take her in his arms and comfort him. When he looked up, he saw Mr. Zuckerman standing quite close, holding a pail of warm slops. He felt relieved. He lifted his nose, and he sniffed, and he smelled delicious warm milk, potato skins, wheat middlings, cornflakes, and popovers left over from breakfast. Come, Pig, said Mr. Zuckerman, tapping the pail. Come, Pig. Wilbur took a step toward the pail. No, said the goose. It's the old pail trick, Wilbur. Don't fall for that. Don't fall for it. He's trying to lure you back into captivity. He's appealing to your stomach. Wilbur didn't care. The food smelled appetizing. He took another step toward the pail. Pig, said Mr. Zuckerman in a kind voice, and he began walking toward the barnyard, looking all about him innocently, as if he didn't know a little white pig was following him all along. You'll be sorry, said the goose. Wilbur didn't care. He kept walking toward the pail of slops. You'll miss your freedom, honked the goose. And an hour of freedom is worth a barrel of slops. Wilbur didn't care. When Mr. Zuckerman reached the pig pen, he climbed over the fence and poured the slops into the trough. The trough is like the place where Wilbur eats out of. When he pulled the loose board away from the fence so there was a wide hole for Wilbur to walk through. Reconsider, said the goose. Wilbur paid no attention. He stepped through the fence into his yard. He walked to the trough and he took a long drink of slops, sucking in milk hungrily, and he chewed the popover. It was good to be home again. While Wilbur ate, Lurvy fetched a hammer and some 8-penny nails and nailed the board in place. Then he and Mr. Zuckerman leaned lazily on the fence. Mr. Zuckerman scratched Wilbur's back with a stick. He's quite a pig, said Lurvy. Yes, he'll make a good pig, said Mr. Zuckerman. Wilbur heard those words of praise. He felt warm milk inside his belly. He felt the pleasant rubbing of the stick along his itchy back. He felt peaceful, happy, and sleepy. This had been a tiring afternoon, and it was still only about 4 o'clock, but Wilbur was ready for bed. I'm really too young to go out into the world alone, he thought as he lay down. And that's the end of chapter 3. See you again.